Well, good afternoon, evening, morning, whatever time. Of course, you may be watching this. It's good to be able to be on here again. I haven't done this, I guess, about a month, maybe, or maybe not quite that long since I did the last one. I've been doing things on here about various beliefs and so forth that I have, just to let you know where I'm kind of coming from. And today, I want to do something like that again. Only it's not going to be quite the same, but because the day I'm recording this is April the 7th, 2023, and that's Good Friday. Or today is Good Friday. You may be watching this a long time after that. It may be long after Easter, but when I'm recording this, and hopefully I will post this on Good Friday, which is today. And so I hope that it's online, if I can do it correctly, by the end of the day. It's in the afternoon, and I'm in a nice place here. You can see, just before I go to talking about what I was going to talk about, and I'll show it a little bit later after I get done, because I don't want to move the camera here. But you can see, I'll just kind of duck out of the way here. You can see behind me a lot of green leaves and all. And all of this is right at the beginning of spring. They have that kind of color to them. They're not as green as they can be. It's kind of that's what I can say, kind of a greenish yellow color almost. There's some of them that are full green, but a lot of them are more of that light green type color. I don't know, something about this time of year, it's not too hot, and today it's really not, because it's rained some today, so it's cool out. It's just that time of year. Weather's not too hot. As the weather goes on, it'll get hotter, and I probably won't be out near as much, won't get out in this as much, but for right now, I can at least still enjoy it for a little bit. But at any rate, today is Good Friday, and it's the day that we celebrate the crucifixion. I read an interesting quote the other day. It said, Christianity is the only religion in the world that celebrates the humiliation of its God. That's kind of an interesting thought, that we hold that. In fact, we've got this in most ways, in most churches and all. You'll see a cross, which is a commemoration of that, the celebration of the crucifixion, which was a humiliating form of death, if you do any kind of the studying of it. And the idea of the actual humiliation, in some sense, was the incarnation itself. And we talk about at Christmas time, when Jesus was born, when God became flesh, because God humbled himself to become like one of his creatures. And that was, so the very fact of the incarnation itself speaks of that. But this was even further humiliation of the cross, of what happened on that. And so it's this time every year that we celebrate that. And I've got my New Testament here. I've got it kind of marked here. I'm holding this. I'm going to read three different places here in a moment. But every year we celebrate this, about the crucifixion of Jesus and what that means, in prelude to Easter that is coming. And but obviously Good Friday had to come first. There was the humiliation before there was the exaltation. And there was what occurred on Calvary. Now, often when we hear it spoken of, and say in secular sources, and even sometimes even in the church, Jesus is spoken of as a victim of the corrupt Jewish leadership in Jerusalem at the time, or in all of Israel, of a misguided Roman government, of a friend who betrayed him, of cowardly followers, or all of the above. And he's often spoken of like that. And from a human viewpoint, shall we say, from a horizontal viewpoint, there is some element of truth to that. But nevertheless, that's not the most accurate way of looking at it. The humans thought they were doing exactly what it was they did. They saw nothing more to it than that, though. But what we learn from the words of Jesus himself, as well as from the words of his disciples in their preaching, as well as what they wrote in many places, we learned that there was a lot more to it than what met the eye. There was more to what happened to Jesus than met the eye, because there was things going on behind the scenes, we might say, that they didn't know about. It tells us that there was more to this than just what appeared. And the first one I think I want to look at is what Jesus himself said in Matthew chapter 20 and verse 28. He says to his disciples in this verse, he says, "Even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom for many." Now, just a little bit of the background of that. James and John had come to him, or I believe in Matthew's account, it was their mother. It was their mother who came to him, asking they wanted to sit on the right hand and the left hand when he came into his kingdom. And he says, "You don't really understand what you're asking for." He says, "Can you be baptized with the baptism I'm going to be baptized with? Can you drink from the cup that I'm going to drink?" And they say, "Oh, sure we can." They don't really know what he's talking about, and he says, "Well, that is indeed going to happen." He says, "But to give you the seats at the right hand and left hand, that's not mine to give, it's my Father's to give." And the other disciples find out about this, become kind of irate that James and John are trying to one-up them and get these, head spots in the kingdom, as it were. So Jesus then tells them in verse 25 of chapter 20 of Matthew, he says, "But Jesus called them unto him and said, Ye know that the princes of the Gentiles exercise dominion over them, and they that are great exercise authority upon them. But it shall not be so among you, but whosoever will be great among you, let him be your minister, and whosoever will be chief among you, let him be your servant." So if you want greatness is not going to be who's sitting on my left and right hand in the way that the Gentiles and kingdoms of this world exercise greatness. He says the one who's the greatest is the one who's the slave. It's not who's got the most people serving him, but who's serving the most people. But then he says to them, he just says, "Even as the Son of Man," talking about himself, "came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Now, we think of minister, when we hear that, we think of a preacher in a church or something, or in some countries it's referred to as the leaders of the country and all, but really it's sort of inverted what it actually means, because it actually means a servant or even a slave. So it was actually a very lowly person. He said, "I didn't come to have people serve me, or to be my servants or slaves or what have you. I came to be that for others." He says, and of course, if anybody had a right to demand, service to him, it was Jesus. But he said, "I didn't come for that. I came to serve others." And he says, the Son of Man came to minister and to give his life a ransom for many. So we're told, Jesus tells us here, this is why I came. This was the reason the Son of Man came, for this purpose. He came to do this. So what was going to happen to him in giving his life was not an accident. It had been planned. He was giving his life as a ransom for many. He came to do this on purpose. He came to give his life, as it says, as a ransom for many. And he came to give his life in the place of many. To take what they should have gotten, he would take that punishment himself. So that's one of the things we see from Jesus' own words, that this was, what he was going to do was being done on purpose. It was not just something that happened. He was not the victim of circumstance, except in the sense he was the creator of that circumstance. He came for that very purpose. And not only did Jesus teach us this, but so did his disciples in the books of the Bible, in the books of the New Testament that are written. You can also see this in some of the preaching in the book of Acts, but in what is written in the book of Hebrews, for example, I want to read Hebrews 9:24. It says, "For Christ is not entered into the holy place made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Nor yet that he should offer himself often, as the high priest entereth into the holy place every year with the blood of others. For then he must have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now once in the end of the world he hath appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself." I thought what I read there didn't exactly sound right. I did skip over a word. Let me read verse 26, the last part I read again. He says, "For then must he often," I left out the word often, "for then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now once in the end of the world hath appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself." He uses the picture here of Jesus as a priest, which the book of Hebrews spends several chapters. The writer of Hebrews spends several chapters on he says, "For Christ is not entered into the holy place made with hands." That means the temple, and before that the tabernacle, the holiest place. It was sometimes called the Holy of Holies, or the most holy place, which was where the Ark of the Covenant stood. And the high priest would go in there once a year to offer up an atonement on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, on the Ark of the Covenant, on the mercy seat on there. It says on there, it says the high priest in verse 25 says the high priest entered into the holy place every year with the blood of others. Notice it says the high priest would go in there with the blood of others, with the sacrificial offering, the blood from that animal that was sacrificed. He would go in there and apply this blood on the mercy seat. It says, "For then he must have suffered since the foundation," must have often, or again I'll keep overlooking that, often have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now once in the end of the world he hath appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself." He says that he did it once, whereas the high priest had to do this yearly. He's done it once. And unlike the high priest of the Old Testament, the Levitical system, he did not offer the blood of others. It says he did it with the sacrifice of himself. In fact, that's what it says in verse 25. The high priest entered into the holy place every year with the blood of others. But Jesus went in there with the blood of himself. So was he the victim of corrupt Jewish leadership, a misguided Roman government, betrayal of a friend even? No. Those were all what we might call secondary causes. But Jesus actually offered himself. Just as the high priest knew every year he was going to have to go in to do that, Jesus knew this was what he was going to have to do. He had said it was for this purpose that he came into the world. He told his disciples, as we read earlier, in Matthew 20, verse 28, and it's also in Mark chapter 10, he says, "I, the Son of Man, has come to be a servant," or not to come to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many. That was his purpose for coming, was to give his life. And it says here, he's even the high priest who offered his life. So who offered up Jesus? Who killed Jesus? Was it the Jews, the Romans, whatnot? In a real sense, it was Jesus himself. He was in control of when he died. He's the one who committed his spirit. The last thing reported that he says before his death was, "Into thy hands, Father, I commend my spirit." And he gives up the ghost. He controlled exactly when he died. He was giving it his life for that very reason. And in one of the verses, in Peter himself, one of Jesus' disciples, is perhaps his closest disciple, along with John and his brother James. Those three would seem to be the closest to Jesus. Peter was the leader in many ways. He says in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 18, he says, "For as much as ye know that you were not redeemed with corruptible things as silver and gold from your vain conversation received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. That's what Hebrews was talking about. Jesus offering himself, given that he was the lamb, the blood. It says, who was verily foreordained before the foundation of the world, but was manifest in these last times for you. You see, he says he was foreordained before the foundation of the world, before time even began. This was foreordained. Jesus, as the lamb, without spot, without blemish, that was his blood that was to be shed, that we were to be redeemed by. So this was not something that the minds of men came up with in the weeks and days prior to Jesus' death and this conspiracy to kill him. Yes, they did that indeed, but we find out that it was long before. It had long before been planned. That the cross was not an afterthought. It was not an accident. He was not a victim of circumstance, but this was the very plan of God. Good Friday, we call it Good Friday because of what was accomplished at the cross. What seemed like a tragedy was really a triumph because the will of God was carried out. What had been destined to be done was indeed accomplished. So, Jesus' death on the cross, the humiliation that he suffered, was something that had been planned all along, something he knew was going to happen, and something that, in a real sense, he was very much the one in control of. So it's something for us to celebrate on this day, what Jesus accomplished by that. The greatest victory that he could have accomplished in this world, he did by the sacrifice of himself. So it's something for us to commemorate and rejoice and be thankful for on this day. And there's one thing here I said I was going to show this to you, so let me turn the camera around here. I said you can see, let me see if I can zoom in just a little bit. You see some of the greenery in through here. Just a few weeks ago, this will all been bare. You still see some places they haven't totally bloomed out yet, but most of these, just about all these trees now have at least the beginnings of leaves coming on them. I don't know if you can hear the water over here, but you can see it running over here. There's a little stream runs next to where I'm at. I'm going to say right there, those leaves are a little bit darker green than the rest of them are, but the rest of these are all kind of still that light green. It's just this, I don't know, it's kind of this nice look that's at this time of year. It is cloudy up today. It hasn't rained on me yet, but just wanted to show it's nice being out. It's fairly cool out today. I will find one other thing over here. See if I can zoom in on that. Got some flowers here that are blooming. And yeah, get a little bit more. There's some on the other side as well. And there's some over there. Nice to get to look at the flowers out here. Well, let me zoom back out here. Well, I will close off the video right now, and as I say, I'll hopefully will when you're watching the early. I don't know when anybody's watching this, but hopefully the earliest you would be able to watch it will be sometime here in just a few hours on Good Friday, and hopefully, good Lord willing, I will have something else here for Easter as well. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening today. God bless you. And remember, as Jesus said, it is finished. His work was indeed accomplished. God bless, and I'll talk with you later. Bye-bye.